I want you to just look at your hand for a second. Just hold it out and look at it.
Okay.
Now, clench your fist. Open it. Clench it again.
Simple enough.
It's simple, right? You think it, and it just happens. The command starts somewhere in your cortex, travels all the way down your spine, hits a motor nerve, and the muscles in your forearm just, like, they obey.
They're waiting for your permission. They are completely compliant.
They are obedient servants of the brain. Without that order, your hand would, it would just sit there forever.
Right. That's voluntary skeletal muscle. It is designed from the ground up to be on standby until the boss, the central nervous system, issues a direct order.
Exactly. But today, we're diving into something fundamentally different. We're looking at an organ that doesn't care about your permission, an organ that would keep on beating even if you severed every single nerve connecting it to your brain.
We're talking about the heart.
We are. And specifically this
Disciplined autonomy. It really is the perfect phrase for this. It captures the central paradox of cardiac physiology. The heart has to be autonomous. It has to generate its own spark, its own rhythm, independent of the brain's micromanagement.
But it can't be a free-for-all.
No, absolutely not. It also has to be incredibly disciplined. It cannot just fire randomly. There has to be this rigid, unyielding hierarchy. Otherwise, the pump fails and we die. It's that simple.
So for this deep dive, we're synthesizing two absolute heavyweights of physiology. We're pulling the cellular mechanics, the real nuts and bolts of ions and channels, from Ganong's review of medical physiology, specifically the chapter on the origin of the heartbeat.
Ganong is where you go for the engineering specs. It tells you exactly how a cell membrane can become a ticking clock. It gives us the how.
And we are pairing that with Guyton Hall, the chapter on rhythmical excitation of the heart.
And Guyton gives us the systems view. It gives us the so what. It connects all those microscopic currents to the clinical reality of arrhythmias, of heart blocks, and, the hemodynamics of just keeping a human being alive.
So our mission today is to map the entire journey of a single heartbeat, from the very first tiny ionic leak all the way to the massive coordinated contraction of the ventricles.
But we're not just going to list the steps. I think that's important. Anyone can read a list. We want to understand the logic of the system.
Why is it built this way?
Exactly. Why does the signal slow down in one specific spot and then speed up in another? And maybe most importantly, what happens when that discipline just collapses?
It's a story about timing.
In the heart, timing isn't just a feature, it's the whole ballgame. If the timing is off by a fraction of a second, the mechanics are worthless.
Okay, so let's start at the very, very beginning. The spark itself. Guyton makes a really crucial distinction right off the bat between two, let's call them gasts, of cells in the heart. You have the workhorses and you have the pacemakers.
Right. And to really understand the pacemakers, who are the real stars of this show, we first have to understand the workhorses, just so we can see the contrast.
So what are the workhorses?
They're the vast majority of your heart. The atrial and ventricular muscle fibers. Their job is purely mechanical. They squeeze. That's what they do.
And electrically, what's their personality like?
They're stoic. They're incredibly stable. If you were to take a probe and measure a ventricular muscle cell, it sits at a resting membrane potential of about minus 90 millivolts.
That's very negative.
It's deeply negative. It's like a rock sitting at the bottom of a deep well. It is not going to move unless something pushes it hard.
So if I took a single ventricular cell out of the heart and put it in a petri dish with all the right nutrients, it would just sit there.
Forever. It would do absolutely nothing. It has no automaticity. It requires a trigger, an electrical signal from a neighboring cell to depolarize and contract. Is a soldier standing perfectly at attention, waiting for the command.
Okay, so those are the workhorses. But then we had the rebels, the pacemaker cells, specifically the ones in the sinoatrial node, or the SA node.
The SA node. This tiny, tiny strip of specialized tissue up in the right atrium, right near where the superior vena cava comes in. These cells are, they're biologically wired to be restless. They are incapable of sitting still.
And Ganong describes this as having an unstable membrane potential.
Exactly. So, unlike our ventricular soldier standing at negative 90, a pacemaker cell finishes a beat, it repolarizes, and it hits its most negative point. But it doesn't rest. It can't. Immediately, automatically, the voltage starts drifting back up again.
It's already climbing toward the threshold to fire again.
The moment it's done, it's preparing for the next one.
And this is what we call the pacemaker potential, or the pre-potential.
Yeah.
And this is where we get into one of my absolute favorite bits of physiological trivia. The current that is responsible for this is literally called the funny current, spelled I sub F.
It's a great name. It was called that because when electrophysiologists first discovered it, they just thought it was weird. It behaved completely backwards compared to almost every other ion channel they knew about.
Backward how? I mean, usually channels open when a cell gets excited, right? When the voltage goes up towards zero.
Precisely. Usually depolarization opens channels. That's the rule. But the funny current is hyperpolarization activated.
Hyperpolarization. So when it's most negative.
Yes. The channel opens specifically when the cell is at its most negative, right? When it's trying to rest after a beat.
That is just fascinating. So the very act of finishing a beat, the act of relaxing, is the trigger that starts the next beat.
It is. The end of one cycle, physically, mechanistically, causes the beginning of the next. There's no gap. The channel opens, and it primarily allows sodium ions, Na+, to leak back into the cell.
I love the analogy of the leaky boat here. It just clicks for me.
It's the best way to visualize it. Think of that ventricular cell we talked about, the workhorse, as a perfectly watertight boat. It sits high and dry in the water until you actively load it.
Okay.
But the SA node cell is a boat with a slow, steady leak in the hull. As soon as you bail all the water out, that's repolarization water, which is our sodium, starts leaking right back in, immediately.
So the boat slowly, inevitably starts to fill up. The voltage inside the cell drifts up from negative closer to zero.
Right. It drifts from that negative state, maybe minus 60, up towards the threshold. And once the water level hits a certain line inside the boat, for the cell, it's about minus 40 millivolts. It triggers the automatic bilge pumps.
And the bilge pump is the action potential, the fire.
Boom. The main voltage-gated calcium channels fly open, the cell rapidly depolarizes, and a signal is sent out to all its neighbors.
Yeah.
The boat is emptied, the system resets, and the leak starts all over again. A perfect repeating cycle.
Now, you mentioned calcium there. That's another really important distinction, isn't it? Because nerve cells, skeletal muscle cells, they usually use sodium for that big explosive spike.
Correct. If you look at a skeletal muscle action potential, it's a jagged, lightning-fast upstroke driven by what we call fast sodium channels. But the SA node is different. It's more of a calcium-dependent cell.
And Genong describes a kind of handoff happening. It's not just one channel.
It's a relay race, a beautiful little sequence. The funny current, that's mostly sodium, starts the slow climb from the bottom.
That's the initial leak.
That's the leak. As the voltage gets closer to threshold, it triggers the first set of calcium channels, the transient or T-type channels. They open briefly and provide a little bridge, a final push to get to threshold. And then, once you hit threshold, the long-lasting or L-type calcium channels slam open. And that's what causes the main upstroke of the action potential.
So instead of a sharp, jagged spike like a nerve, you get more of a rolling wave?
It's a smoother, slower rise. And this is absolutely crucial because that slope, the speed of that prepotential rise, how fast the boat fills, is adjustable.
Ah, and that brings us to the disciplined part of our disciplined autonomy.
Exactly. The heart generates its own rhythm, yes. That's the autonomy. But the brain, through the autonomic nervous system, gets to decide the tempo. It controls the rate of the leak.
The accelerator and the brake?
The accelerator and the brake. The heart has autonomy, but it is always open to suggestion.
Okay, let's look at the accelerator first, the sympathetic nervous system. You're running for a bus, you see a tiger, you're stressed. Your nerves dump norepinephrine onto the SA node. What is happening to our leaky boat?
Okay, so norepinephrine binds to beta-1 receptors on the surface of those SA node cells. This triggers a cascade inside the cell cyclic AMP increases, which directly acts on those funny channels and the L-type calcium channels.
And what does it do to them?
It essentially makes them stay open longer and wider. It increases their probability of being open.
So the hole in the boat gets bigger.
The leak becomes a torrent. The slope of that prepotential becomes incredibly steep. So instead of taking, say, 800 milliseconds for the boat to fill up and fire, maybe it only takes 400.
And your heart rate doubles from 75 to 150.
Just like that. And what's interesting is that this happens almost instantly. It's not a slow genomic, gene transcription thing. It's a direct chemical modification of the channels.
It has to be fast. If a tiger is chasing you, you can't wait 30 minutes.
You need those channels to change their probability of opening right now.
Okay, so that's the accelerator. Now for the brake. The parasympathetic system, which is carried by the vagus nerve, this one is really cool because I think it explains so much about what it means to be fit.
Right. The vagal brake. It is the dominant force in most humans at rest. Here's a thought experiment for you. If I could magically reach in and cut your vagus nerve right now, your heart rate would immediately jump to about 100 beats per minute.
100? That's high.
It is. That's the intrinsic rate of the SA node's leak when left to its own devices. That's its natural rhythm.
So my resting heart rate of, say, 65 or 70 means the vagus nerve is actively holding me back.
Yes. It is constantly dripping acetylcholine onto your SA node, putting the brakes on.
And what's the mechanism there? How does it slow things down?
It's very clever. Acetylcholine binds to a different receptor, a muscarinic M2 receptor, and its main effect is to open a special set of potassium channels. We call them the IK-ACK channels.
Okay, and potassium is concentrated inside the cell, so if you open a channel for it,
It rushes out. A positive charge is leaving the cell. This makes the inside of the cell even more negative. It hypopolarizes it.
So going back to our boat analogy,
It's like you're not just bailing water out at the end of a cycle, you're actively pushing the boat deeper down into the water. You're starting the climb from a much deeper valley.
so it just takes longer for that same size leak to bring the voltage back up to the threshold.
A lot longer. And it also flattens the slope of the prepotential itself. It does two things to slow the heart down.
And this is exactly why endurance athletes have such low resting heart rates, right? Bradycardia.
Exactly. We call it high vagal tone. An athlete's heart becomes so strong, its stroke volume is so high, that the brain realizes, hey, I don't need to beat 70 times a minute to supply the body.
It can get away with 40 or 45.
Right. So it clamps down hard on that vagal brake. A low resting heart rate in an athlete isn't the sign of a broken engine. It's a sign of a very high performance engine that is idling with incredible efficiency.
So we have our spark. The SA node is leaking, it's reaching threshold, it's firing, and its rate is being modulated by the brain. But a spark in one corner of the right atrium is useless if it doesn't translate into a coordinated squeeze of the entire massive organ.
And this is where we move from the origin of the heartbeat to the conduction. The theme shifts from autonomy to timing, pure, unadulterated timing.
The signal leaves the SA node. It starts to spread through the atrial muscle walls. Genong mentions these internodal pathways in a specific one called Bachman's bundle.
Right. Think of it like a ripple in a pond. The SA node is where the pebble drops, and the signal spreads radially across the walls of the right and left atria.
And this causes the top chambers, the atria, to contract.
Yes, it's a wave of depolarization that leads to a wave of contraction. Blood gets squeezed down towards the ventricles.
But then the signal hits a border, a fibrous, non-conductive skeleton that separates the atria from the ventricles, and it hits a checkpoint.
The AV node, the atrioventricular node. This is, and I'm not exaggerating, arguably the most critical single piece of engineering in the entire heart.
Because something very strange happens here. The speed drops.
It doesn't just drop. The conduction velocity, the speed of that electrical signal, falls off a cliff.
Gannon puts numbers to it. In the atrial pathways, the speed is about 1 meter per second. In the AV node, it's 0.05 meters per second. It basically crawls.
It's a physiological traffic jam.
Yeah.
And it is completely intentional. It's built that way for a reason.
So what's the reason? Why on earth would you want to slow down the most important signal in the body?
Because of the mechanics. You had to think about the plumbing. If that signal shot straight from the SA node to the ventricles at full speed,
Everything would contract at once.
at the exact same time, the atria and the ventricles would squeeze simultaneously.
And that would be bad.
Catastrophic. The atria would be trying to push blood down, but the massive ventricular doors, the tricuspid and mitral valves, would be slamming shut in their faces because the ventricles were also squeezing at the same time.
The pump would be fighting itself.
It would be a stalemate. No blood would move forward. It would be a complete hemodynamic failure.
So the AV delay, that roughly 0.1 second pause, is there to allow the atria to finish their job first.
Precisely. It ensures that what we call the atrial kick can happen. The atria squeeze, they top off the ventricles with that last crucial 20 to 30% of blood, and then, only when the ventricles are completely full and primed, does the AV node open the gate and let the signal pass through.
I want to push on that atrial kick idea for a second. You sometimes hear that people can live without it, like in atrial fibrillation.
And they can. In a young, healthy person at rest, gravity and passive flow from the veins do about 70 to 80% of the ventricular filling. You could lose your atrial kick and sit here talking to me just fine.
But
If you have a stiff, non-compliant heart, say, from years of untreated high blood pressure, or if you try to stand up quickly or run for a bus, that passive flow is not enough. You absolutely need that active atrial squeeze to prime the pump effectively.
that's when the AV delay goes from being a luxury to a necessity.
Absolutely. The sicker the heart, the more important the atrial kick becomes.
Okay, so the signal has patiently waited. It's cleared the AV node checkpoint. Now it enters the ventricles. And here, the strategy flips completely.
A total 180. Now, we don't want delay. We want speed. We want explosive synchrony. The signal enters the bundle of His and then branches into the Purkinje system.
The autobahn of the heart.
That's a perfect name for it. These Purkinje fibers are massive cells. They are built for speed. They can conduct at up to 4 meters per second.
4 meters per second, compared to 0.05 in the AV node.
It's an 80-fold increase in speed. It's a lightning bolt.
And looking at the anatomy in Guyton, these fibers don't just, spread into the muscle near the top. They do something specific. They dive down.
They dive deep. They travel down the interventricular septum, that's the wall between the left and right ventricles, all the way to the apex, the very bottom tip of the heart. They deliver the spark to the bottom first.
So why is that directionality so important? Why start at the bottom?
Think about a tube of toothpaste.
Okay.
If you want to empty it efficiently, you squeeze from the bottom up, right?
Right.
If you squeeze it in the middle, paste squirts out both ends, it's a mess. It's inefficient.
So the Purkinje fibers are ensuring the heart squeezes from the bottom up, from the apex to the base.
Exactly. The wave of contraction starts at the tip and spirals upward, wringing the blood out of the ventricles and pushing it forcefully up and out into the aorta and the pulmonary artery. If the conduction was slow, or if it started at the top, you'd trap blood in the bottom of the heart. It would be hemodynamically useless.
It's just amazing to think about. That tiny 0.1 second delay at the AV node, followed by the lightning-fast Purkinje sprint. That precise rhythm is the heartbeat. It's not just a beat, it's a sequence.
It creates the coordinated mechanical event that keeps us alive. And luckily for us, that massive electrical sequence creates a signal strong enough that it actually travels through the body and reaches the surface of the skin.
Which brings us to probably the most famous diagnostic tool in all of cardiology, the ECG, the electrocardiogram.
The shadow on the wall.
I like that description. Ganem is very, very careful to correct a common misconception here. When we look at that ECG trace, we are not seeing the heart muscle move. We're not seeing a contraction.
No. You cannot see mechanical contraction on an ECG. It's an electrical recording. You're seeing the command to contract. You're seeing the summed electrical potential of millions of cells depolarizing and then repolarizing. The electricity always precedes the mechanical squeeze.
So let's decode those cryptic squiggles, the classic waveform. We have the P wave, the QRS complex, and the T wave.
Okay. The P wave is that first little bump you see. That corresponds to the atrial depolarization, that ripple spreading out from the SA node across the two atria.
Then there's a flat line, the PR interval.
That flat line is the sound of waiting. That is the signal sitting quietly in the AV node, moving so slowly and through such a small mass of tissue that it barely registers on the skin electrodes. It's the pause for the atrial kick.
And then the main event, the QRS, that big, sharp spike.
That's ventricular depolarization. The signal hits the Purkinje system and ignites the massive muscle mass of the ventricles. It's tall and sharp for two reasons. The muscle mass is huge, and the conduction speed is incredibly fast.
And finally, after the spike, there's that last, broader hump, the T wave.
That's the reset. That's ventricular repolarization. The cells are actively pumping ions back to where they belong, reloading the gun, getting ready for the next shot.
Now, I have a question that I think bothers a lot of students when they first learn this. It bothered me. We have a wave for atrial depolarization, the P wave. We have a wave for ventricular depolarization, the QRS. We have a wave for ventricular repolarization, the T wave.
So where's the other one?
Exactly. Where is atrial repolarization? Don't the atria need to reset too?
They absolutely do, and they do generate an electrical wave when they repolarize.
Yeah.
But you almost never see it on a standard ECG.
Is it just too small?
It's not so much that it's too small, although it is smaller than the ventricular waves. The main problem is its timing. It's just timed terribly. Atrial repolarization happens at the exact same moment that the ventricles are firing their massive depolarization signal.
So it's buried.
It is completely buried.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to hear someone whisper during a rock concert. The QRS complex is the rock concert. The electrical noise of the massive ventricles firing completely drowns out the tiny whisper of the atria resetting. It's there, but it's hidden inside the QRS.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's briefly touch on vector analysis. This is the part of the textbook that usually makes people's eyes glaze over, but the camera analogy really helped me visualize it.
It's really the only way to understand it intuitively. When you strap electrodes to a patient's chest and limbs, you have to think of each electrode or each lead as a camera or an eye looking at the heart from a very specific position.
And electricity isn't just a thing, it has a direction. It flows.
Right. And the fundamental rule of the ECG is simple. If the wave of positive charge, the depolarization, is moving towards the eye, the pen on the ECG goes UP. If the wave is moving away from the eye, the pen goes down.
Okay, so let's take the classic lead 2. That's the one we always see on TV. It's looking from the perspective of the left leg, kind of up towards the right shoulder.
Right. And since the heart sits in the chest, pointing generally down and to the left, the normal wave of depolarization flows from the SA node in the top right down towards the apex at the bottom left.
So the electricity is rushing straight at the lead 2 camera.
It's coming right for us. It's looking at the headlights of the train. So in lead 2, a normal ECG shows a massive upward-pointing spike for the QRS complex.
But what if we look from a different angle? What about lead AVR? That's the camera on the right wrist.
Well, think about it. The signal starts near the right shoulder and moves down and to the left. It is running directly away from the right wrist camera. That camera is viewing the taillights of the train as it speeds away.
So in AVR, the QRS should be negative.
Deeply negative. It points down. And that's perfectly normal.
So if a medical student sees an upside-down QRS and AVR, they shouldn't panic and think the leads are on backward.
No, that's normal physics. But if you look at lead 2 and it's upside down, or if that QRS spike is way, way too tall, now you have clues.
Ganong talks about hypertrophy here. Let's say I have high blood pressure for 20 years. My left ventricle has to work harder, so it gets thick. It gets massive.
More muscle means more cells. More cells mean more ions flowing with each beat. So the total voltage generated by that hypertrophied left ventricle becomes enormous.
And the camera sees that.
The camera gets blinded by it. On the ECG, the QRS complex in the leads, looking at the left ventricle, becomes incredibly tall. It just screams voltage. It's a map of the heart's muscle mass.
It's just incredible that these little squiggly lines are essentially a map of mass, timing, and direction.
It's a geometry problem being solved with electricity in real time.
So we've laid out the perfect system, the ideal. Disciplined autonomy in action. The SA node leads, the AV node delays, the Purkinje fiber sprint. But now we have to turn to Guyton and dive into the chaotic reality of the clinic. The system fails. Arrhythmias.
And this is where the why of physiology becomes a matter of life or death.
Let's start with simple speed issues, tachycardia and bradycardia.
Right. Tachycardia, heart rate over 100 beats per minute, too fast. Bradycardia, heart rate under 60, too slow.
But as we discussed earlier with the athletes, context is everything here.
Absolutely. A slinking endurance athlete with a heart rate of 40 is perfectly healthy. A grandmother standing in line at the grocery store with a heart rate of 40 is about to pass out because her brain isn't getting enough oxygen. The number alone doesn't tell you the pathology. You have to ask what the body is doing.
There is one arrhythmia that Guyton highlights, which I found so surprisingly counterintuitive. Sinus arrhythmia. I mean, the name itself sounds like a disease.
It does, but it's actually a sign of robust health, especially in young people. If you take a moment and just listen carefully to a young, fit person's heart while they breathe, you'll notice their heart rate isn't a perfect metronome.
It speeds up when they inhale and it slows down when they exhale.
That's sinus arrhythmia. It's caused by what we call spillover in the brainstem. The respiratory center signals the body to inhale, and some of that electrical signal spills over to the nearby cardiovascular center and momentarily inhibits the vagus nerve.
So the brake comes off a little bit.
The brake comes off, heart rate drifts up. Then you exhale, the signal stops, the vagal brake comes back on, and the heart rate drifts down.
So a heart that varies with your breath is a healthy heart.
Yes. A heart that beats like a perfect robot. 72, 72, 72, regardless of what you're doing or how you're breathing. That's actually often a sign of autonomic failure. It can mean the heart has stopped listening to the body's needs. We want variability. We want responsiveness.
That's a huge takeaway for me. Reliability is not the same as rigidity.
That's the essence of disciplined autonomy.
Okay, let's move to something less benign. Heart block. This is when our AV node checkpoint starts to malfunction.
The communication breakdown. And the checkpoint can fail in stages. We call them degrees of block.
First-degree heart block. I've heard this called the lazy messenger.
That's a good way to think of it. In first-degree block, every signal from the atrium gets through to the ventricles. No beats are dropped, but they take too long to get there. That PR interval we talked about, the flat line, it stretches out. The doorman's just moving really, really slowly.
Yeah. Is it dangerous?
Usually it's not. You monitor it, you see what might be causing it, but you don't typically panic.
Okay, then we have second-degree block, and here Guyton makes a crucial distinction between Mobitz type I and Mobitz type 2. I used to get these mixed up constantly.
It's a vital distinction clinically. Mobit stace, which we also call Wenckebach, is a functional fatigue. The AV node is getting tired, so the first beat gets through on time, the second one takes a little longer, the third one takes even longer, and the fourth just doesn't make it through. The door stays shut.
Longer drop.
Exactly.
Right.
Then the node gets a beat to rest, it resets, and the whole cycle starts over again. It's usually benign, it's often seen in athletes, it's just a tired but otherwise healthy node.
But Mobitz 2 is different.
Mobitz 2 is terrifying. There's no pattern of fatigue. The PR interval is normal, and then bam, a drop beat out of nowhere, a P wave with no QRS after it.
Why is that so much worse?
Because it implies structural damage, usually below the AV node in the His-Purkinje system. It means the fibers themselves, the wires, are physically failing. It's not fatigue, it's a broken wire.
And broken wires tend to snap completely.
They do. Mobitz II is considered a ticking time bomb. It can progress suddenly to a complete heart block.
Which is third-degree block, the total divorce between the atria and the ventricles.
It's a complete communication breakdown. The atria are beating along at their own pace, say 80 beats per minute, driven by the SA node. But the ventricles are completely cut off. They hear nothing. The checkpoint is cemented shut.
But, and this comes right back to our intro, the patient doesn't necessarily die on the spot because of the built-in redundancy, the disciplined autonomy.
Exactly. A hierarchy of backup systems. The SA node is the general. But if the general is assassinated or cut off, the captains are programmed to take over.
These are the latent pacemakers.
Yes. The cells of the AV node, the bundle of His, and the Purkinje fibers themselves all have some degree of automaticity. They can leak and fire on their own. They're just much slower than the SA node.
So they're usually suppressed.
They are. The fast rate of the SA node overdrive suppresses them. But if they don't hear from the SA node for a few seconds, they realize, hey, we are on our own, and they start to fire.
And this is called the escape rhythm.
Yes. It's a slow, thumping, wide, complex rhythm, maybe 30 or 40 beats per minute if it's coming from the Purkinje fibers. But it's usually enough to keep you conscious. It keeps you alive.
However, Guyton describes this terrifying transition period called Stokes-Adams syndrome because the backup generator doesn't kick in instantly, does it?
No. That overdrive suppression is a real thing. The ventricles are used to being obedient soldiers. When the command signal suddenly stops, they just sit there, stunned, for a moment.
So there's a pause, a period of asystole.
A flat line. For 5, 10, sometimes up to 30 seconds. There's no ventricular heartbeat.
30 seconds? Your brain can't survive that.
The brain runs out of oxygen in about 3 to 5 seconds. The patient loses consciousness. They just drop to the floor. They might even have a seizure. And then, thud, thud, thud. The Purkinje fibers finally wake up and the escape rhythm starts. The patient regains consciousness, completely confused about what happened.
That pause, that Stokes-Adams attack, is lethal if the backup doesn't start.
It is the single best argument for getting a pacemaker implanted.
Okay, let's flip the script. We've talked about signals being blocked. What about signals firing when they shouldn't? Mutiny in the ranks? Ectopic foci?
An ectopic focus is just a part of the heart, usually an irritable spot in the atrium or the ventricle, that decides to fire on its own. Maybe it's not getting enough oxygen, which we call ischemia. Maybe you drank 5 espressos or didn't sleep. It gets irritable and decides it doesn't want to wait for the SA node. It fires early.
And this gives us the PVC, the premature ventricular contraction, what patients call the skipped beat.
Patients always come in and they say, Doc, my heart skipped a beat. But electrically, that's the opposite of what happened. It didn't skip. It added an extra beat.
So why does it feel like a skip?
Okay, so the premature beat happens really early, right after the last normal beat. The ventricle hasn't had much time to fill with blood yet, so it squeezes on a nearly empty chamber.
So you don't feel a pulse.
Right. You don't feel a pulse in your wrist because very little blood was ejected. That's the skip sensation, the absence of the expected beat.
But there's more to it?
There is. Because it fired early, the whole electrical system has to reset. There's a long pause after the PVC. We call it the compensatory pause, before the next scheduled beat from the SA node can get through.
And during that long pause?
The ventricle just keeps filling and filling and filling. It's over full. So when the next normal scheduled beat finally arrives, wham! It contracts with incredible force and ejects a massive volume of blood.
That's the thud you feel in your chest.
Exactly. You don't actually feel the weak premature beat. You feel the super-powered recovery beat that comes after the pause.
PVCs are usually harmless in a healthy heart. But Guyton warns about something called the vulnerable period, the R on T phenomenon. This is where timing gets really scary.
Right. Remember the T wave on the ECG? That's the heart resetting, repolarization. During that T wave, the heart muscle is electrically chaotic. Some fibers have fully reset, some are halfway there, some have not. It's electrically patchy and unstable.
It's like a forest that is half wet from rain and half bone dry.
That's a perfect analogy. And if an ecopic spark of PVC hits exactly on top of that T wave, it's like throwing a lit match into that patchy forest. It can trigger a chaotic, self-perpetuating chain reaction.
It can initiate what are called circus movements.
Which leads us to the ultimate breakdown of discipline. Fibrillation, the bag of worms.
So what is this mechanism? Re-entry or circus movement?
Imagine a signal, a runner, on a circular track. Normally, the runner goes around the track once and gets back to the starting line, but the starting line is tired, it's resting, it's refractory, so the runner has to stop. The signal dies out.
But in a diseased heart.
Guyton gives us the 3 key ingredients for disaster. 1, make the track longer, like in a dilated, enlarged heart. 2, make the runner slower, like in ischemic tissue with slow conduction. And 3, shorten the rest period of the starting line, the refractory period, which can happen with drugs or high adrenaline.
If you have those conditions.
The slow runner goes around a long track, and by the time they get back to the starting line isn't resting anymore. It's recovered. It's ready to go again.
So the signal doesn't die.
It re-enters the loop. It just keeps going around and around, chasing its own tail.
And in ventricular fibrillation, or VFib, this isn't just one runner on one track.
No, it fractures. The signal hits a small area of dead tissue and has to split, so one wave becomes 2. 2 become 4, 4 become 8. Within seconds, you have hundreds of tiny, random electrical wavelets swirling chaotically around the ventricles.
And what does that do mechanically?
The pumping stops. The muscle just quivers. It loses all coordination. If you saw it in surgery, it literally looks like a writhing bag of worms. There is zero cardiac output. You are clinically dead within seconds.
And this is why we defibrillate. And I really want to clarify this because TV gets it wrong every single time. We are not jump-starting a flatlined heart.
No, that is the opposite of what's happening. The battery isn't dead in VFib. The battery is exploding. There is too much electrical activity. Defibrillation is not a jump start. It's a hard reset, a forced shutdown.
It's a silencer.
We send a massive, overwhelming voltage through the entire chest. The goal is to depolarize every single cell in the heart at the exact same time. We want to throw every cell into the refractory period simultaneously.
We stun it into silence.
We turn it off. And we hope, we pray, that when all the cells wake up from that stun, the SA node, which has the fastest intrinsic clock, will be the first one to speak up and reestablish that disciplined, top-down rhythm.
It's the physiological equivalent of IT support's first question. Have you tried turning it off and on again?
That is literally what defibrillation is.
Now, atrial fibrillation, AFib, is the same mechanism, this chaotic re-entry, but it's confined to the top chambers. And yet people walk around with AFib for years. They don't die instantly. Why?
And this brings us right back to the atrial kick. If your atria are quivering like a bag of worms, you lose that final 20 to 30% topping off of the ventricles. You'll probably feel tired. You might get short of breath walking upstairs. But the ventricles are still getting 70 to 80% of their blood by passive filling. They're still pumping the main load.
So the immediate danger isn't pump failure, it's something else.
It's stasis. It's fluid dynamics. When blood sits still and stagnates in those little nooks and crannies of the quivering atria, it clots.
And if that clot breaks free,
it gets pumped out of the left ventricle, up the carotid arteries, and straight to the brain. It causes a stroke.
That's why AFib is so dangerous. Not because the heart stops, but because it throws shrapnel at the brain.
Which is why the main treatment is anticoagulation, blood thinners.
Okay, before we wrap up, we have to just briefly touch on the chemical environment. We've been talking about electricity, but in the body, electricity is just ions moving around. And potassium seems to be the hero and the villain in every medical drama.
Potassium is the great stabilizer, and when it's out of balance, the great destabilizer.
Genong has a great section on hyperkalemia, high potassium in the blood.
This is a tricky one. You'd think that because the resting potential depends on potassium concentration, if you have high potassium outside the cell, the gradient is less steep. The cell becomes less negative, closer to threshold.
So it should be more excitable.
And at first, for a moment, it is. But then something paradoxical happens. It stops firing completely. It's a phenomenon called inactivation. To fire an action potential, the fast sodium channels have to open, then they inactivate, and then they have to reset to a closed but ready to open state. but they can only reset if the membrane potential drops all the way back down to that deep negative resting state of native 90 milliV.
But high potassium keeps the voltage high. It keeps it less negative.
Exactly. The cell never fully repolarizes. The sodium channels get stuck in that inactivated state. The gun can't be recocked, the heart becomes unexcitable. Paralyzed, it goes flaccid, it stops in diastole.
Which is why potassium chloride is used in lethal injections. It doesn't cause a heart attack, it just quietly turns off the generator.
It's a silent electrical death.
And on the flip side of that, let's look at ischemia, a true heart attack from a blocked artery. Guyton talks about the current of injury.
When heart muscle tissue dies from lack of oxygen, the cell membranes break down. They become leaky.
So ions are flowing when they shouldn't be.
Even when the heart is supposed to be in its resting phase, between beats, a steady current is flowing from the healthy tissue into the dead, leaky tissue.
And the ECG can see this steady, abnormal current.
It can. This is the source of ST elevation, which is the hallmark of a major heart attack, a STEMI. Technically, what's happening is that the baseline of the ECG, the TQ segment, drops because of that injury current. But because the machine calibrates itself, it looks like the ST segment is lifting up.
And that lift is the tombstone on the ECG.
It tells you in real time that heart muscle is dying right now.
It brings it all back to that initial idea, doesn't it? The heart is a machine of disciplined autonomy. It has this incredible built-in redundancy, the escape rhythms, it has these critical safety checks, the AV delay, but it's all predicated on a precise chemical and structural environment.
It's incredibly robust, but it's not invincible.
Yeah.
The rules of physics and chemistry still apply.
So as we close out this deep dive, I just want to circle back to that thought we had about variability.
The idea that health is not a metronome.
Right. We strive for stability and predictability in our lives, but in physiology, total unwavering rigidity is often a sign of impending failure.
Yeah.
A healthy heart speeds up and slows down. It listens to your breath. It listens to your nerves. It is constantly engaged in a rich conversation with the rest of the body.
That disciplined autonomy is what allows the heart to listen to the body's ever-changing needs while still maintaining its own essential life-sustaining rhythm. If it stops listening, or if that internal discipline breaks down into chaos, the entire system collapses.
So next time you see an ECG trace, or even just feel your own pulse, I'd encourage you not to just count the beats. Think about the pause between them. Think about that tiny crucial delay in the AV node that allows your ventricles to fill. Think about the billions of ions leaking across membranes just to keep that spark alive, completely independent of your conscious thought.
It really is the most sophisticated and reliable autopilot in the known universe.
And it's beating away in your chest right now.
And hopefully it's doing it with a little bit of healthy sinus arrhythmia.
Thanks for diving in with us. We really encourage you to check out Ganong's chapter on the origin of the heartbeat and Guyton's on rhythmical excitation. Seeing the diagrams for yourself, they're really worth it. We'll see you on the next one.
Take care.